Hi class. I thought that I would go over our Edulastic math review from yesterday so that we are ready for our test this afternoon. As you can see, we did a really nice job on plotting on the coordinate grid. Most people are doing well there. A few of us just flipping the X and Y. But our main thing that we have to go over is finding averages of our line plots. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Number one simply asked us, how many recipes did Ruth look at for figuring out the amount of nutmeg in teaspoons? Well, there I would simply count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She looked at 8 recipes, and that's what her X's represent. So I need to remember this number when I am finding my averages. So if I were you, I would be solving these on a loose leaf piece of paper because these questions build upon one another, and I'm going to need to use this 8 again. The second question is also going to help us lead to that averages question. It's asking for the total amount of nutmeg in teaspoons. So what I need to do is I need to use my compatible numbers and actually calculate how many teaspoons these X's represent. So that's a 1/4 teaspoon X and another 1/4. I'm going to add those together to make a compatible number of 1/2. So this is something that you can be doing, and it's easier if you write it out on a piece of paper because I'm not sure that you have a scratch pad while you're solving this. Okay, it's hard to do mentally. You'll make a mistake, so write it out. Next, these are 1/2 X's, and I know that 2 1/2s equal 1 whole. So another 1/2 plus 1/2 is a whole. Now I'm left with 1 1/2. Oh, but look at that. Here is another. So this 1/2 plus that 1/2 X is another 1 whole. That gives me 3 wholes, and the final X represents 3/4. So 3 3/4 is the total amount of nutmeg. This I'm going to need to use when I find the average on the next question. Let's see how we did there. Yep, a couple of us got that, and we used it as 15/4. If you wanted to calculate this by changing everything into a common denominator, that would have been just fine. Each of these would have represented 2/4, and you could have added them all together to give you 15/4. Another way to add those if you don't use compatible numbers. All right, so I have the number 8 and the number 3 3/4 memorized in my head. When I go over to question number 3, I need to put those together. So when I find the average amount of nutmeg, I need to take that calculation, the total that everything represents, so the total number of teaspoons divided by the number of X's, or the number of data points. I'll just write number of X's for right now. All right, so I remember that my total was 3 3/4 teaspoons of nutmeg altogether, but I need to divide that by 8, which was my number of data points. When I'm dividing with a fraction, I want to use an improper fraction. I don't want to mess with this this mixed number. So I'm going to change this to an improper fraction. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15/4. So I am taking 15/4 and dividing that fraction by 8. We need to remember keep, change, flip when we're dividing fractions. So I'm going to keep 15/4, and I'm going to change this into a multiplication problem. Oops. I need to write 15/4. Got ahead of myself, and I'm changing this into, instead of dividing by 8, I'm multiplying by 1/8. So here I multiply across, and I have 15 divided by 4 times 8 is 32. Now you will notice that it had accepted 1/2 as an answer. 15 over 32 is really close to 1/2, so I think that's what our answer key did. But 1532 cannot be simplified anymore, and that would be a fine answer. I know that that's reasonable because it's in between these data points. It should be pretty close to wherever most of my x's are, which is 1/2. So as you scroll down and see some other answers, for example, 4 3/4 was not a reasonable answer because it's not even on this number line. We need what is like the middle value. What do most of the x's represent? Okay, let's try another one with question number 4 and 5. Question number 4, half of us got. We need to look at this number line and decide how many recipes would call for more than 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Well, I'm going to annotate that more than 1/4 teaspoon. So I look at all of these data points and I want to know which of those fractions are more than 1/4. Well, I know 1/8 is the smallest and 1/2 is the biggest. So I look at this 1/4. It doesn't say at least 1/4. It says more than 1/4. So I need to cut this off. All of these x's are more than 1/4. 3/8 is more than 1/4, and so is 1/2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 recipes. You have to count all of them, not just the one in one row, and not just 1/4. It needs to be more than 1/4. Question number 5 has us put it all together in one step. You know the steps. We can do it. Okay, lots of numbers here. Again, I'm going to really stress, put this on a loose leaf piece of paper for yourself to add compatible numbers. I have 4/4 here. 4/4, I'm sorry, I have 4/8 here. 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. That's a nice compatible number. I need to figure out my total. Okay, so I have 1/2 over here. Those are taken care of. Here I have 4/4. 4/4 is equivalent to 1/2. Now, 3/8, 3/8, 3/8, 3/8. For the time being, let me just call that 12/8 when I bring them all together. Okay, so I have 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 12, and they're eighths. And then this 1/2 represents 1. So now I can rewrite this as, well, let's do 2 wholes plus 12/8 plus 1/2. Well, I know that 12/8 I can take out a whole number of 1 whole, which is 8/8, and I'm left with 4/8. 8 minus 12 is 4. So when I have 2 drop down plus 1 and 4/8 plus 1/2, oh, look at that. That comes out so nicely because 4/8 plus 1/2 is 1 whole. So that gives me 2 plus 1 is 4. Now, I'm going to use a different color. Okay, so that was our total. That would not be a final answer because it does not go in between these data points. My answer should be somewhere around 1/4 and 3/8. I need to take this total divided by the number of x's. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 4/14. I can simplify that by dividing by 2. That gives me 2/7. 2/7 does seem reasonable. Would be here in the middle somewhere. Let's see how we did. Okay, a lot of us got, oh, look at that. Somebody got 2 sevens. That might have been a mistake on our end for the answer key. All right, so that's okay. Your review is just graded for completion, not for accuracy. All right, now you've seen 2 examples of area. Feel free to look back at this video while you are taking your test. We are okay with that, all right, ladies and gentlemen? Lastly, let's just go over real quick ordered pairs. Okay, I have the answer of 5, 3 or the answer of 3, 5. Remember, you have to walk into the elevator first before it rises up. So it needs to go X, Y. So X was over 3 and Y was up 5. So it should have been 3, 5. I'd love it even more if you put in these parentheses. Your Edulastic might require you to put in parentheses. So technically you should have parentheses 3, 5 parentheses. All right. Lastly, you're doing the opposite. Let's go here to the written response. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to do one more. Number 10, some of us got wrong. This is where you're finding a point. So it says place 4, 1. Well, I need to go over 4, up 1. That's going to be our movie theater. All right. Lastly, our written response, looking at a table, finding the rule. Okay, so I look at my inputs and I look at my outputs in order to determine the missing value. Well, it looks like from 2 to 10, I can multiply by 5. Does it hold up? Yes. 4 times 5 is 20. 6 times 5 is 30. 8 times 5 is 40. So 10 times 5 is 50. You could type up your answer and tell me, well, how does this relate to CDs sold? Well, look, if I sell 2 CDs and I get $10, that would tell me that it's $5 per CD. So the written response is asking you to kind of think about it in terms of the real world. So make sure you just look at these units. All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, use a loose leaf piece of paper. Come back to this video to help you while you take your at-home test. I wish you guys good luck and enjoy your spring break after all this hard work today.